Hello and welcome to another Maine SBDC webinar. Everybody's getting connected from the waiting room. My name is Kelsey Reardon and I'm with the state office hosted by USM right in Portland. And today we have Corey Zimmerman of the WanderWeb yet again to help us with some marketing tips. So this webinar is all about e-commerce and what the current environment looks like, what are your options. She's going to give you some really good comparisons so that you kind of know what's available and what might work best for you and your small business. If you are not familiar with the Maine SBDC, we are the Small Business Development Centers, and we are a essentially federally funded program. So we provide no cost to you confidential business advising. And so we can help with just about any small business need you have. If we can't answer your question, we can certainly find someone who can, like one of our great specialists. So Corey Zimmerman has been working with us for the last year or two, I think now. And she's been really great at working one-on-one with some small businesses. Well, I guess two-on-one. So in conjunction with our business advisors, we've got a couple specialists who can help you out. So we have a few marketing specialists. We have an accounting specialist. We have a lot of options. So once you are set up with a business advisor, you have access to all of that. So there's a very easy clickable button on our website that says request advising. If you're not already set up, that is the fastest way to get into our system. Later today, I'll be sending out a follow-up email that will include the slides from today's presentation and a link to the recording, as well as all of our contact information. So there'll be a link to request advising right in that email. So you don't need to go searching for it now. Corey's sessions are always very informative. She said that this one in particular, people are scribbling notes away. So remember that we are recording today and you can always rewind to go back and check that. So definitely take notes because that's helpful for how we learn. Most people learn anyway, but you will have access to all of that later on. And then the only other thing I wanted to point out is today's session is an hour and a half long, so it goes till 1:30. So if for some reason you were like, what, it's only ever an hour, I only have lunch, don't worry. Like I said, we're recording it and you can always come back and finish it later. Otherwise, stick any questions you have in the chat below. Likewise, after the fact, if you come up with any questions, you can always respond to any email you've gotten from me and it will end up in the same place. So I think without further ado, I think we can get started and I'll pass it over to Corey.
Hey everybody, my name's Corey. Welcome to eCommerce Essentials. Thought I'd do a quick introduction. So let's start this whole slide deck. Start it up. All right. I am Corey. I own a web design and search engine optimization agency in Bangor, Maine, where we focus on helping, in particular, female entrepreneurs scale and grow their businesses. So prior to starting my business, I have 20 years in the healthcare industry and I specialized in systems and operations and have some certifications in performance improvement. So I work really hard with businesses that I advise to figure out what sort of you're starting with as far as your goals for your business, and then we reverse engineer a process to get you there. So today we're going to talk about some of the digital marketing e-commerce products that are out there. We'll talk about how you get paid online, because that is probably the most important thing that we can do as business owners these days is get paid online. Before, you know, back in the olden days when people paid us with checks and cash, that was great. But today is a whole new different ballpark. So we'll talk about how you get paid digitally with using for credit cards, etc. We'll also talk about the best solution for processing credit cards and automatic check transfers and some specific situations within which you might choose one payment processing system or another. And we'll also talk about some of the tools that are out there that you might already have that you can get paid through, that you might not know that are available for you to charge online. So let's start with this number, 87%. 87% of shoppers begin product searches on digital channels. That is up from 71% prior to COVID, okay, the pandemic. So even if customers come in and they end up buying from a physical store, 87% of shoppers are doing some sort of research online prior, okay? Especially on eBay and Amazon. So they do often some comparison shopping. So when we talk about how payment processing works for businesses, this 87% is really important. And let's talk about how it applies. So what happens is a customer will decide to buy something online. Whether it's on Amazon, you've got your products listed on Amazon, on your website, through a different payment portal, whatever. They'll decide they want to buy something and they'll click, this is how payment processing works. They will click the button. You've done this 1,000 times. Click the buy now button, right? So what happens at that point is payment information zooms through the internet and it is captured and securely routed to a gateway to be processed and approved. This all happens in the blink of an eye. Payment is confirmed and you're notified, right? And fulfillment starts. So as a business owner, once the you really typically don't get notified of purchases unless it's an abandoned cart, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But today we're really going to talk about payment processing and how to set that up. Once the payment is confirmed, you can fulfill the order, whether it's an online or a service-based product or service-based offer, and you receive your deposit. You get cash money. It's very exciting. Okay. So, is there a one-size-all-fits solution for payment processing? And the answer is no. It really depends on how you run your business. And selecting the right payment method requires a lot of consideration around the cost of your goods that you're selling, the software integrations that you may have, the things going in and out of your payment processing, the number and type of products that you sell, and how you sell them. And we'll talk about some really specific circumstances. Also, how you deliver your products, and if you have a CRM or a customer relationship management module or not. And today, by the end of this session, you're going to understand how they all work together. It sounds complicated, but it's not. Well, it sounds complicated, but it's not hard to understand the different steps of it anyway. Payment processing is complicated, and that's why we've got aggregators out there. So let's talk about the different aggregators. So what a payment aggregator is a one-stop shop that you can go to accept payments for your products, and you don't have to go through banks to do the processing. So there's two ways you can get paid online. You can use either a payment aggregator, like PayPal, Stripe, or Square. Those are the big three. Or you can get a merchant account through a bank. So those are your two options, and some benefits and cons are applied to both. All right, so let's talk about the pros and cons of a payment aggregator and what actually a payment aggregator is. So a payment aggregator is an online application that will process your payments for you and deposit the payments into your account, like PayPal. So we've all used PayPal before. So what happens is with PayPal, if a person purchases something on PayPal, PayPal processes the payment, and within 1 to 2 days, they automatically drop the payment if it went through into the merchant's account. Same with Stripe and Square. So the benefits of these payment aggregators are they are super simple to set up. You literally just log into PayPal or Stripe or right? And set up your account. And within 1 to 2 days, you have a way to accept payments online. So the other things that are great about it is customers are really familiar when they see PayPal, they're really familiar with it. And also with Stripe and Square, they're familiar with those too. They just don't know it. But when they see those little Visa symbols or things like that, they've seen them and they trust them. So it's an instant solution for business owners. And if you're looking to get set up quickly, it is a super easy, great way to get set up for payments online. They're free and it's easy to activate the account. You do have to do a verification process where they test making the deposits into your account with a couple pennies. Like usually it's 1 cent or 7 cents. Sometimes if they're feeling frisky, they might give you 13 cents and you verify that you've got those deposits into your account. And once that happens, you're absolutely live and ready to go. So I really do like payment aggregators for the simplicity of it. However, you do pay a transaction fee that is a little higher for the benefits of using these payment aggregators. So typically what you'll pay for a payment aggregator like PayPal is 30 cents for each transaction, and then 3 cents per dollar, so 3% fee. So if you do if you have $100 purchase from a customer, then you'll pay 30 cents plus $3. So that transaction will cost you $3.30. So that's something that you need to factor into your business. And going back a few slides, do you remember, we're going to loop back to a few things. Remember when we talked about briefly, just a couple of seconds ago, is it really depends on the product that you use and what you choose to use as your payment aggregator. So for example, if you're a convenience store and you're selling on average a lot of low priced items like gum, candy bars, bags of chips, right? Those are $2 to $3 purchases. And sometimes what happens is you're paying that 30 cents, and that's a big chunk of your percentage of your profits, right? And so you'll see that sometimes very small businesses that sell those low cost goods will ask for a minimum fee or a minimum transaction amount in order to have the ability for the customer to use their Visa, MasterCard, whatever. And that's because every time somebody makes a purchase with their credit card, the merchant or you pay a fee, okay? You pay that 30 cents plus 3% of the transaction. Okay, I see that there's a couple questions in the chat. Is there anything that I need to address right away, Kelsey?
No, we were just discussing the costs of building an entire website. And so I linked to another webinar that goes more into depth for that, for an overview. And then it's like the short e-commerce section of that webinar. This one expands on that. So it's a good building step.
Okay, thank you. So the cons for payment aggregators, again, like PayPal, fees can get very expensive. The other thing that happens, so, you know, that 3% and 30 cents per transaction does add up. So at some point, you'll be paying hundreds of dollars a month for transaction fees. That is a cost of doing business in today's world, and it really does need to be factored into the bottom line and part of your cost of goods. And so just consider that when you're deciding your pricing structure, that you very likely will have to upmark your product a little bit to account for credit card transaction fees as a merchant. One of the other cons of the payment aggregators is they can put a freeze on your account for any reason. It's at their discretion. And so there's a lot of really common reasons why PayPal, Stripe, whatever, may put freezes on your account. And let me tell you, when that happens, it's not easy to correct the issue because you may not know what the issue is on top of everything else. But let's talk about some common reasons why payment aggregators would freeze accounts, okay? The most common is there's a spike in volume or revenue coming through your aggregator. So PayPal, all of a sudden you've been making $10,000 a month or $5,000 a month or $1,000 a month, and all of a sudden you're making $25,000 a month. And we've not notified PayPal or any of the other aggregators in advance of that revenue jump happening. And so they would automatically freeze that account. Okay, that happens pretty frequently. So if you've got a spike in your volume or your revenue, an unexplained spike. So say you are selling this awesome t-shirt online and your monthly gross income is typically around $2,000, right? And then all of a sudden your income goes up to $10,000. PayPal, if they don't have a reasonable explanation for that and they don't look hard, they will freeze your account. Okay, so you make a change in your business and your income suddenly increases to $10,000 a month. Or the aggregator, this is the second thing, will, if they find out you're selling something that you have not disclosed to them. All right, so say you're that t-shirt business and all of a sudden they find out you're also selling puppies under that tax ID number or your TIN, right? If PayPal finds that out and you've not disclosed it to them, because they're not sure if that's the same business or a separate business, frozen, okay? And when I say PayPal, I just mean aggregators in general. The Stripe, PayPal, and Square are the most common ones. We'll talk about some of the others as well. So the best way to prevent this is to let your aggregator know as early as possible about any changes that will be affecting your revenue stream. The other issue that may come up is selling a product that is not federally approved. So we've talked about payment aggregators and the commonalities for the costs and the risks of that. So the pros and the cons. Pros are payment aggregators are super easy and quick to set up. Cons are they cost a little bit more. The other option you have for payment processing as a merchant or a sale or a service-based provider is a dedicated account for processing through a bank. The benefits of this is there's no middleman, so there's no aggregator that can shut down your account, and you typically will have a relationship with your business banker. The cost is often lower, typically a 2 to 2.5% fee plus a monthly standard fee, which typically ranges between $5 and $50 per month. So there's some general rules of thumb around when to go for a merchant account and when to go for a payment aggregator. General rule of thumb that I will tell you is, as a web developer and someone who does work occasionally with merchants, I typically recommend that if you're processing more than $5,000 on average per month via your aggregator, then it's time to reach out and consider a merchant account, because that's the point where that 3.5% or 3% and the 2 to 2.5% starts to flatten out, and you'll start to pay more for the aggregator, right? So I typically recommend, once you start to expect a $5,000 a month credit card payments, not in revenue, because people will pay you through different methods, right? Once you're consistently above $5,000 a month for credit card payments, it's time to start to think about transitioning to a merchant account. There's other situations, such as you have a lot of very low cost transactions, like those candy bar transactions that we talked about. It might benefit you. You might overall save with a merchant account, but that's an atypical case-by-case situation that you should speak with your advisor about to do some specific calculations. And if your advisor isn't sure how to figure that out exactly for you, we have Rainer Large with SBDC, who is an expert in figuring out all of this stuff, so they can pull him in. And I personally have worked with Rainer on different things for my business and for businesses that I've worked with, and he is fabulous at projecting costs and benefits of things. So the cons of a merchant account are, it's like getting a mortgage on steroids, right? So you have to go through that whole process of being vetted and approved by a bank in order to process payment through them. It's a very complex, long process and requires a longer time frame. Okay, so let's do a side-by-side comparison. So with your payment aggregators, which are typically PayPal, Stripe, or Square, and we're going to talk about each one of these individually, you'll find that they're quick and easy to set up. You don't need to have underwriting like you would for a merchant account or a bank. Worldwide availability, if you're selling internationally, will be a factor that you would consider, okay? As a pro, those are great pros, right? Cons are you risk a frozen account, okay? That's high risk of your account being frozen, and your rates, your payment rates that you pay for transaction fees as the merchant will be a little higher, okay? So for a merchant account, you can build something that is custom to you. Typically, you have a relationship with your banker. You'll have lower rates, and the benefit of those are great if you're selling on average more than $5,000 a month in credit card fees, in credit card transactions. The con is it's not very common yet for banks, especially local banks, to process international sales. Okay, I'm not saying that's not coming. I think that we're changing our dynamic. COVID has changed a lot of things for the better as far as online and opening us up to the world and communicating with the other countries and selling outside of the US a little bit easier, but banks are still working on that process. So how do you decide which one to use? We talked about how many transactions do you expect? So if you expect a bunch of low-cost transactions, right, you may want to avoid paying that 30 cents per transaction. It may be more beneficial for you to pay that low-cost once-a-month fee for the merchant account, the $50 to $100, right, or $5 to $50. So those candy bars come in handy. You know, that candy bar situation comes in handy to think about at this point, right? So if you're doing a lot of transactions that are $5 or less, you may want to consider going right to a merchant account, because you might pay more in transaction fees with an aggregator on that 30 cents per transaction than you would in that flat one-time a month fee, right? Again, these are things that you might want to talk to your advisor about to really weigh the pros and the cons. Do you need a quick fix? Do you need to be up and running tomorrow, right? So we've worked with some businesses at WanderWeb that they're like, I know that a merchant account would work better for us, but right now we need to be able to process payments immediately. So we're going to start with an aggregator and work on getting that merchant account up and going over time, right? So that was a quick out of the gate. Within a day or two, they were able to process payments. And do you want flexibility, or do you want an off-the-shelf solution, right? So the flexibility of a bank is great for businesses with specific situations that they may need to think outside the box for the way that they take payments or receive payments. The aggregators work the way they work. You don't get to ask them to do something different or special for you, okay? So what questions do you have about aggregators versus merchant accounts, or specific situations where you may want to pick one over the other?
There is one question. Does having a merchant account limit or make more difficult the ability to set up an e-commerce site where payment aggregators are kind of standard fare?
So typically banks or the merchants will give you the assets you need in order to add things onto the back end of your website. They've already thought that through for you, and there will be most likely an e-commerce interface specialist at the bank that can work with you on that, especially if you're doing the website yourself. There'll be somebody that can help you from the bank. Most website portals have payment processing built in the back of them for aggregators already, right? And if you're doing the merchant account, you'll usually need to work a little bit with the bank. Does that answer the question? Want to make sure I'm clear.
Sounded good to me.
Great. So again, to go back, just a couple things that you need to think of. If you're doing a lot of transactions, low cost transactions, you may want to use a merchant account because that flat fee might be cheaper than the 30 cents per transaction, right? So if you're paying 30 cents on a dollar purchase, right, as a dollar profit that your business is bringing in, that really decreases your profit margin, right? And also if you're selling more than $5,000 a month that's being processed through credit cards, consider a merchant fee. Those are your 2 rules of thumb. Okay. So let's now talk about the payment processors themselves. So let's talk about the aggregators. Okay. Everyone, does anyone need a minute to, I know it's a lot of information. It's simple, but it's not easy, right? Okay. So the big 3 that you'll see, we've already talked about them, are PayPal, Stripe, and Square. Okay. So I guarantee you've worked with these at any given time. You've seen PayPal on a website. You pretty much all websites that if it doesn't say it's PayPal, it probably is Stripe or a merchant account. And if you've ever swiped with those little things that people plug into their iPads, you've used Square. Okay. So a lot of people use PayPal. Most people have a PayPal account. And as a merchant, it's a great way to get started. To note, something to note is PayPal owns Braintree, which is another version of Stripe, a very complex version of Stripe, which we'll talk about a little bit. But PayPal also owns Venmo. So you'll find over time that PayPal will be starting to integrate Venmo into their payment processing. It's a great solution for small to medium-sized businesses with low volume or low income coming through the payment portal. Okay, that less than $5,000, right? Okay, or bigger transactions. Okay, because then you're spending the 30 cents. If you're spending 30 cents for a $3,000 transaction or a $1 transaction, that 30 cents is still being spent, right? So that's what I mean, the lower volume of cash coming through or the higher volume of numbers coming through are good for your aggregator. So Stripe is something that you probably have seen 1,000 times and not even realized it. Why? Because it's customized to look like whatever the vendor wants it to look like. So whatever the merchant wants it to look like, they can brand it, what we call white labeling, or put our own logo and things on to Stripe. And so you'll be paying for things via Stripe and not even realizing that you're using Stripe. So Stripe is typically added to the back end of websites. And what I mean by the back end of websites is the application part of a website, like your phone. You know, you can use your phone and use an application, but the building of the application would be considered the back end of the application. Okay, so it's available on pretty much all online platforms, whether you're using Wix, Squarespace, Shopify, all of them have a Stripe integration. Okay, what I like about Stripe is it has an ACH portal. And so what that means is you can take transactions through online checking at a very low rate. It's a 1% rate. So if you have customers that maybe are on a retainer model and pay you, say, a monthly fee for a service or a product that they're getting, then those ACH payments can come in really handy because they lower your percentage that you're paying for merchant fees. Okay. You do have to have a special relationship with your customers to ask them to do an ACH or a checking transaction because it is more work for them, right? And so sometimes, often, closing the transaction supersedes the benefit of the lower rate. So just a consideration. So Stripe can be customized on invoices and receipts. It's available on almost all platforms. And if you use Shopify, you're already using Stripe. The other thing that Stripe allows for that PayPal doesn't, or it doesn't do well, is it allows for recurring payments. So this is a great one for any service-based businesses that have a retainer model or subscription-based services or products. So we've talked about PayPal out of the box. Stripe is pretty customizable, and it's already built into the back end of most websites. So if you're working on your website, it's there for you. You just have to do a little bit of customization by dragging and dropping your logo in and maybe adding some custom text like, hey, thank you, like from Corey, right? At the bottom of a receipt or something, right? Or it's been such a pleasure working with you. If you have any questions, drop us a chat, like question at blah, blah, blah. Have a great day. Or like I like to say, have a wonderful day. It's a great way to make a personal connection with your customers. The other option is Square. So you've seen Square is that little block that plugs into the bottom of an iPhone or iPad. It's good for point of sale business. And what we mean by point of sale business is you're taking payment at the curb, at the time that you cut the hair, at the time that you deliver the salon service or whatever, right? So you can take payment right there on your phone. You don't pay any extra charge for the software or the little square that you put in, but you do, again, have that 2.9 or 3% per transaction plus 30 cents per transaction fee. So Square is a great payment portal option for anyone that wants to be able to take their payment processing with them. So if you go to commercial shows, if you're a hairdresser or in a salon, or even sometimes like with the pandemic, you know, they bring the payment portal right out and slide it through your window to your car. Square works really well for all of that. And that's what it's designed to do, okay? So those are the big three. So typically when I'm doing a recommendation for customers, is I sit down, I do a discovery with them, try and figure out all those questions that we talked about. How much do you anticipate you're going to be processing and payment fees per month? What's the average sale amount, right? How often do you make a sale? Do you mind paying those transaction fees? You know, are your customers even going to use this, right? There are some other options that are out there that are available, and you'll find that they're available through a lot of these three aggregators that we already covered. But Venmo is again owned by PayPal. You have the option to put that onto your website. Google Pay is another option that can be added, and Apple Pay. Amazon Pay is great. People recognize it. It's easy to use. It's right up there with PayPal for recognition. And I did mention Braintree. Braintree is the PayPal's version of Stripe. Remember, we talked about the customizable one, but typically this one requires an experienced web developer to work with Braintree. So I typically would not recommend Braintree personally, just because Stripe is so easy to work with and it's already integrated onto most websites, platforms. But Braintree is an option if for some reason Stripe isn't an option for you. So if you don't have strong technical skills, you'll probably need a web developer for Braintree. But all of the other ones, if you're able to develop your website yourself, you should be able to set up this process. It will talk you through the process, and there's lots of YouTube videos that you could YouTube your very specific scenario on, okay, I want to set up payment processing with Stripe on Shopify. How do I do it? And there'll be a guy on YouTube that's literally like, okay, first you click here. So easy, right? And you just need to set it up the one time. Take an afternoon, right? There are some rules of thumb around payment processing that we will talk about, some user experience rules of thumb to increase your conversion rate or your likelihood of closing your sale online. We're going to talk about those things too. And that's where I start to have a little bit of fun, because when I start to think about getting in the customer's head for you and what they're thinking and what problem we're solving for them at specific phases in the buyer journey, that is so much fun. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about that. So Amazon Pay is another option for you that we touched on briefly. It's great if you're already selling on Amazon. Customers who know their Amazon password don't need to type in their credit card information. So it's a super easy user experience, and the conversion rate is incredibly high for Amazon Pay. There's not a lot of drop-offs at that point. So if someone has decided to click into Amazon Pay, typically it's easy for them to make the payment. And obviously you don't want to throw any shade up, any difficulty for your customers at the point of payment, because that's the most crucial time in the decision process, is right before they click that buy button. It's so easy to abandon cart, right? Think about all those carts that you've gone online shopping and you've added 20 things to your cart and you've had so much fun. And then you get to the cart and you think, I'm just gonna, I'll come back to it. There's a lot of user experience techniques you can use in order to encourage the customer along at that point. So the other thing we talked about was ACH, or automatic checking transactions, or e-checks, right? You can save a lot of money on fees with this because you're only paying 1% per transaction. But it's a poor user experience because customers then need to go in, type out their account number, type in the routing number, and process everything manually, right? By typing things in. It's not as easy for customers to do that. So I would encourage you, if you are going to go this route, that you really think about customer experience and decide if the risk is worth the reward, okay? So let's talk about a little bit about user experience. I just alluded to that this is the most crucial time, is once people have loaded their cart and they're ready to click that buy button, that pay button right there, right? This is the time that most of your customers are going to abandon their cart. So there's 2 points in your sales process that are incredibly important. The first is right before they pay. That's super important. It's so easy for them to abandon cart. So you want to make it as easy as possible at this point for your customer to purchase that product. So typically best practice is to have multiple ways for your customer to pay. So with Stripe, that is automatic. You'll have your ACH, you'll have any type of credit card can be processed, but you may want to also add on Amazon. If you know your customers are typically shop on Amazon, you may want to think about your particular customer and what they would be most likely to use to close the sale. So you want to make it as easy as possible for your customer to purchase. Don't throw up any barriers, but also make them feel like a hero at that point, okay? So at this point, if you're someone who owns a business and say you donate 5% of all your proceeds to animals in Botswana who have 3 legs instead of 4, right? Like all 3-legged animals you donate money to them 5%. Let me tell you something. You don't donate that money. The customer donates that money, okay? Because of their purchase, they're helping 3-legged animals in Botswana, okay? So at this point, it's not about you, right? It's about the customer. And yes, you're doing a wonderful thing by donating and you've arranged it, and that is great, but the customer's purchase is supporting that. And so even though you're donating part of your profits, this is something to get in the customer's head that's very meaningful for the customer. So they feel really good about their purchase. So if they're on the fence and they think, oh, I love 3-legged animals in Botswana, or ladies that weave baskets in Thailand, right? Like that are underpaid, and you support them so that they can follow their dream of weaving baskets. Like there's whatever, right? There's 1,000 different ways that we can contribute. Turtles in Key West, right? Like there's 1,000 things. The customer is helping that. The customer, their purchase is helping those turtles, okay? So some language around your closing, around the buy button works really great. Like 5% of your purchase will support ladies in Thailand weaving baskets, right? So make it easy. Know that the easiest thing for them to do is click that red X button in the upper right-hand corner of the website. That's way easier for a customer to do than to click the buy button, okay? So they're going to have some anxiety around this purchase. So anything you can do to make them feel better about the purchase, comfortable with the purchase, and know that they're doing a good thing and reassure them is great. And if you want to get ninja, the next step is to, after their purchase, let them know you just made a great decision, right? Think about when you're at a restaurant, and I love this when this happens, and I know that I'm being manipulated every single time, but when everyone orders their meal and when I order my meal and the waiter goes, good choice, I'm like, yes, it is. You know, I'm so proud of myself, right? Like, I made a good choice. Do that for your customers, reassure them, let them know that that is a great choice. So you want to avoid abandoned cart by letting them know what their purchase means. So your why is super important, and reassure them afterwards that they made a great decision. Okay. And a lot of these payment portals will allow you to put that onto the receipt or something, right? That customizable language. That's where Stripe comes in handy, because you can do some customizations with that can make your customer feel really, really great. You could put a meme in of like a little boy dancing, right? Whatever you want, those things are available to you. And they're memorable. So, can you charge your customers for the credit card fees? What do you guys think? Put it in the chat. Yes or no? Anybody? Crickets? Gotcha. Okay. I like Tammy. Yes, you're right. It should be built into the cost of the product. This is a cost of doing business, right? You don't want to throw up any barriers. And man, do I hate the shoulds, right? You should do this, you should do that. But honestly, like, this is a cost of doing business, and putting a barrier to closing the sale up is tricky. You're going to decrease your conversion rate. So because credit cards really eat into the profits of your business, it's important that you raise your prices to account for that. Okay, so you will account for the cost of that in your pricing. And something that I would consider or encourage you to do is calculate what you expect, so that, because it's very easy in your mind to say, oh, if I didn't have this $500 a month credit card fee, right? But if you calculate it into, okay, I expected that $500 a month credit card fee, I'm right on target moving forward, right? Okay, so you legally can charge for credit card fees, but you have to tell the customer you're doing it, okay? You have to disclose that, and you have to label it as a convenience fee. So if you do have some barriers to processing credit cards, I typically would recommend, if you have to put up some sort of shade to closing a sale, I would typically recommend you set a minimum amount spent to use a credit card. Because if someone's going to make a $4 purchase, they'll pay $5 so that they can use their credit card, right? So there's sometimes an economical benefit there, because you're increasing the cost of your sale overall, or the amount for your sale. But you also are not allowed to charge more than the cost to process the card. So you have to do a calculation for every purchase of what that processing fee is. If you charge a fee, when you provide a refund, or if you provide a refund, you also have to provide the cost of the credit card processing. Okay. So those are some considerations around charging a client. I typically don't recommend it. If someone is really concerned about the cost of credit card fees, that's time to really go to a merchant account. Okay. And you'll still have to pay fees. They're just slightly lower. So customers do not respond to paying fees. They expect to be able to pay with their credit cards. Please, if you're going to do this, do a cost benefit analysis. So that specific situation that we talked about, where if you have an average of $4 purchases and you decide, okay, I'm going to require a minimum of $5 in order to use credit cards, I'm going to put a little sign up in my store. That's, do a cost benefit analysis. Don't blindly just do it. put that sign up, really think about it and the benefits of it. And again, that's where experts like Rainer come in, and our SBDC advisor that really looks at costs and benefits. And please take advantage of those things. That it's amazing the resources that are available through the Small Business Development Center. I personally am a small business owner myself, even though I'm a specialty advisor as well, and I still have a business advisor with the Small Business Development Center. So best practice is you allow for your credit card fees in your pricing and consider it a cost of doing business. That's just the way it is today. Okay. What questions do you have about payment aggregators and merchant accounts? Because we're moving on from that at this point.
One person asked about how Venmo fit into things, but I think that you covered that a few slides later. So if that person has follow-up questions, now would be a great time.
I can't add to that though. Venmo just recently started to, if you have more than $600 in transactions annually, then you'll have to pay a merchant fee for those transactions. Yeah. So consider that. That's absolutely new. Venmo's sort of been under the radar for a while, and you could use it for, you weren't supposed to, but you could use it for business, and some businesses did use it, especially service-based businesses. They would just have someone Venmo them. And so that loop has been closed. And Venmo does have the opportunity now to create a business account. Okay, so we've talked about payment processing. Now we're going to talk about the stores themselves, the online stores, and how this all ties together. So what we're going to cover now is the types of stores that are available to be built online. And we'll go over the pros and cons of them, just like we went over the pros and cons of the aggregators and the merchant account, okay? So Wix, pretty much all portals now, all website builders have a payment processing software and the ability to add a store into it, okay? So we're going to talk about the more common ones. There are a few others out there that occasionally someone will bring up and ask me about, and honestly, they're so off the beaten path that I'm not including them today, and I probably don't know a lot about them, but you can, if there's one that you will have a specific question about, we can certainly talk about it. Okay, so Wix is, if you are a DIYer, Wix is great. Wix is easy to build, it's easy to set up. The cost is relatively low. You'll start at around $29 a month to use their platform, to host their website and use their builder, okay? It has its own payment processor, which is acceptable, but you can add in those other payment processors that we talked about, PayPal, Stripe. Just like you would add an application to your phone, you can add an application to the back of your website. I will point out though, Wix, Squarespace, Shopify, those three, you do not own that website, okay? That website is owned by the platform. So if you have a Wix website, you're paying Wix to use their website space. That website is owned by Wix. You can't just take it and put it somewhere else. You have to rebuild. It's not yours. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to Wix. Okay. So one thing that I'd like you to keep in mind is if you're really looking to scale, to really grow your business, there's some other platforms that are out there that you own your website outright. With Wix, Shopify, and Squarespace, if you're planning on scaling, a consideration is if you ever really can't use that platform for whatever reason, you need to start from scratch on a different platform. You can't just take the website with you. It doesn't mean you shouldn't use it, because sometimes done is better than perfect, right? And often as a business owner, done is way better than perfect, but it's a consideration to have. So if you really are planning to grow your business in a huge way, this might not be the best way to start. You might want to start on WordPress or a different platform where you own your assets. Okay. Squarespace is another one that people use. I personally am not a huge fan of Squarespace. I think if you're going to choose between Wix and Squarespace, Wix is a little bit easier to use for the novice, okay? The plugins, it's just a little bit more simple. The interface is more clear, and I find Squarespace is incredibly limiting. I've worked with it a little bit. My agency is a WordPress agency, but we have worked with the other platforms a little bit here and there, and Wix is night and day easier than Squarespace. Having said that, if you already know how to use Squarespace, then Squarespace is going to be easier for you because that's what you know, right? So again, done is better than perfect. So just because I'm saying Wix is easier to use than Squarespace, in my opinion, if you're starting fresh with one or the other and you've never used either before, I probably would try Wix first. But if you're already using Squarespace, stay with what you know. You're good. It's all about what you know. Okay. Squarespace is a tiny bit cheaper. It starts at $26 a month. You can use Stripe, but you can use Stripe with Wix too, and add in other payment integrations. Square can be added onto Squarespace. So that little Square portal that we talked about is great and can be used on Squarespace. Okay. So if you're doing point of sale, this might be one that you want to use to build your website with. Okay. Kelsey, did you have any thoughts about these? I know you dabbled around in some of these before too.
Yeah, so I was just talking to Brandon McDonald, who's a business advisor and center director up in the county. And I took an HTML class in college and we had to build our websites. And I kept that exact page that I had built till like 2015. Yeah. And then I got a Squarespace. So I learned how to drag and drop things. They changed it quite a bit in between when I first built it and my update. So like my website is not cohesive currently. So I'm kind of laughing at some of this. But the SBDC uses WordPress. And so I have learned a little bit of both. And they each have their quirks. Mm-hmm. They each have their pros. From a drag and drop option, I really like Squarespace. And for like really bare minimum, like if you don't have a design background, mm-hmm. There are more than enough tools to get you a pretty website. But I have learned to really like WordPress actually. So I'm kind of on your team.
The thing that I find with Squarespace is if you want to put in an image, if there's the image is the image. There's no saying, oh, I'll just do a third or I'll size this down. Like the design is what it is, and you need to fit your product to the design, not the other way around. And so like Kelsey said, it can make things less cohesive. So for example, if you have a photographer that doesn't really know your brand and they do a landscape photograph, you can only use that in one place because you can't size that, it makes it a little tricky. So I've good brand photography. I could talk about it all day long because it really can make a website look professional. If you're going to invest in anything, and I own a website design agency, I typically say start with brand photography. Don't start with me. Start with brand photography because you can use that in 1,000 different ways. You can use it on your emails. You can use it on your website that you made your. I mean, I could sing the praises of good brand photography for years. That will help you sell more than a professionally designed, expensive website will. Okay. And that's coming from a professional web designer. So take it for what it is. Having said that, if you want a professional website and you already have good brand photography, then there's lots of great options out there. Okay, so the third one that we're going to talk about, so we talked about Wix and Squarespace. Shopify, I would say, is probably the most scalable option for product-based businesses when it comes to the three. Okay, so Shopify is built as an e-commerce tool. So if you have product-based things that you're selling, that will be the feature and the focus of your website, right? With Wix and Squarespace, you often get into your, telling your story circle because it's a website design tool that also offers online sales. Shopify offers online sales, and you have the ability to also add in some personal information onto your website. So I like Shopify if you're going to be a product-based sales business. Shopify is integrated with Stripe already, and you can add PayPal so that you can increase your conversion rate. You've got lots of options to add anything in for payment processing on all of these. It's just easier on Shopify. Have you worked with Shopify much, Kelsey? Yeah, I've worked with it a bit, and the way that it carries over. So when you go from the product itself to the product page to the purchase page, it just flows really well, and it has a good customer experience built in that you don't really need to think about as the creator of the website.
No, I have Square set up because it's built into the whatever Squarespace. And I have like little strip that I take with me to fairs. So I like do no customization for my e-commerce. It's like there's one thing, it never runs out, because then I make like a custom version anyway. So I do as little as possible.
If you're a point of sale vendor, like a stylist, or you're going to fairs or shows, Squarespace is a really good option. So really, you can see that there's pros and cons of any of these, right? You just have to decide the one that's right for your business. So Kelsey likes Square. Why? Because she likes to use the remote payment option, the point of sale option, and she's comfortable with it. So it wouldn't make sense for her to say, go to Wix or even Shopify, right? Would anybody like to ask any questions about a suggestion for them of the three? Like if you're thinking about which one to pick?
Yeah, sometimes it can be hard to know like what it is you're looking for. So Corey's a great person to pick her brain about that.
Yes. So if you ever are thinking about it or wondering which one, sign up for an SBD session and ask for a specialty marketing advisor consultation. We're available through the end of September, and we will do a one-on-one with you and talk about your specific situation, your specific business goals, and how you can achieve it with digital assets. It really is worthwhile. We can get a lot done in an hour. Instead of researching for hours, you can just ask someone a question and be like, okay, this is what you need, right? Okay, so those are startup business options, although some businesses can live forever on Wix, Squarespace, right, or Shopify. But if you really are planning from the beginning to scale your business, you may want to consider something that you have high customizable abilities with. Is that grammatically correct? I don't know. Do you understand what I mean? I hope so. And you own it, right? So you're building an asset for your business. The first one of the lowest hanging fruit is WordPress. So WordPress is a little bit cheaper than those other options. However, you often, if you haven't worked with WordPress before, it's so customizable that it can be overwhelming, and you can do a lot more good, evil than good with your design thinking, because you just don't know where to go. There's no templates or platforms per se that say, because you can make it do anything. So typically you'll need at least a designer or a developer, right, to build or design your website for you, or to give you at least some guidance. The SBDC advisors can help you with that as well. They can look over your website and say, okay, here's a few things you can do to quickly improve your website. So WordPress uses an online application, or a plugin is what WordPress calls them, called Woocommerce. So you'll see Woo written in places. That's referring to the WordPress online sales portal. WordPress is good for businesses of all sizes. It's very economical, but you probably are going to need some sort of professional support if you haven't ever worked with WordPress before. Having said that, there's great new drag and drop editors that you can just plug into WordPress and turn it into a portal like Shopify, where you just drag and drop things in. And the one that I typically recommend is called Elementor. It's a great drag and drop editor. It's what we use at WanderWeb, and I absolutely highly recommend it. There's a free version. WordPress is free to use. You do have to pay for hosting though. and you can pay for hosting very inexpensively. It can cost as low as $3 a month to host your website on like Bluehost is a hosting portal, or even there's lots of them, HostGator. There's lots of them out there. You just pick one. Bluehost is a great place to start. And that for 3 years, I think you pay $140 to host your website for 3 years. The other scalable option that's out there is Magento. I do not recommend Magento. I've never recommended Magento. It's not that I ever wouldn't recommend Magento. It's that this is the consideration, is Magento costs on average $22,000 a year. And unless you're a really huge business, it really doesn't make sense to pay for that, especially when you can do everything pretty much with WordPress that you might want. Okay, so I just wanted to mention it to let you know that it's out there. There are platforms that use Magento. They use it very successfully. They love it. It's incredibly expensive to use. It also requires a developer. You can't do it on your own. I honestly don't even know that I've ever worked with Magento. I've worked with some other agencies that I've referred Magento contracts to, and they love it. But because of the price, I just don't see it ever really being a choice that I would recommend for my clients or small business. Okay. So what questions do you have about the different website builders?
It does seem like we lost the first person that was asking those questions early on in the session. So
yeah. Okay. Okay. So some of the other ways you can get paid, I wanted to cover those because you don't necessarily need to always have a website. You might not yet have your website. You might have Calendly. You might have just your customer relationship management portal, right? So how can you make those work for you? You can still take payments if you don't have a website, okay? So the first way that you can do that is with your accounting software, all right? So there's 3 accounting software tools that are pretty common out there. Quickbooks, which is a bookkeeping software. What I found with Quickbooks as a small business owner is QuickBooks is great for bookkeeping. It's not great for entrepreneurs. It's not really designed for entrepreneurs to do their billing with. It's really designed for accountants and bookkeepers. Same with Xero. Okay, Xero is just another bookkeeping software that's out there. It can integrate into different platforms, and you can process payments through it. If you're just getting started, a platform that I typically love to recommend to is, in particular, service-based providers who want an easy way to invoice. I recommend Wave accounting software. And Wave is great for entrepreneurs, and it has a great customer experience. What it doesn't do well is report out, okay? So with Xero and QuickBooks, you can segment and like cross-reference your data and your numbers and see what service lines are the most profitable. And so those are very scalable, right? You can meet with your bookkeeper or your accountant, and they can look at your QuickBooks or your Xero and really give you a good idea about, like, okay, this service line was incredibly profitable. This service line has an incredibly high cost of goods, but you're selling a lot of it. Like, is it worth it, right? So they can break it down and really look at the analytics of it. You can't necessarily do that with Wave. You can create a chart of accounts and put things into buckets, but it's very clunky on reporting. So I used Wave my first year in business. It got me out of the gate right away. It's super easy as an entrepreneur for you to snap a picture of a receipt, and it will actually scan it and enter the value into your Wave account without you having to do manual entry like you would for QuickBooks or Xero. They just haven't caught up for the front end entrepreneurs with those other 2 platforms. I really wish they would, because they could be unstoppable, but Wave is available to you, and it's 100% free. It uses Stripe in the back end for processing, so you can even customize your receipts. Okay, so you send out an email saying, it was so great to meet with you, or it will be great to meet with you next Thursday. Here's your invoice in advance of our meeting or in follow-up to our meeting, whatever, right? You can do all of that through Wave. Okay, so you can invoice through your payment processing tools or your accounting software, okay? You can also invoice through your scheduling software. So both Calendly and Acuity are really common scheduling software that integrate with your calendar, right? So these are good for service-based providers who sell their time. Say, for example, you're selling a knitting class, right? You could create a Calendly event for the knitting class that costs $35, just for a random number. And in order for people to sign up, they have to pay the $35 in advance. And they do that all through Calendly. They can even fill out a questionnaire in Calendly and in Acuity and in advance and let you know what their problems they're trying to solve or where they're at in their learning journey for knitting, for example. And you can do SMS or text, email reminders in advance of the session. So Calendly and Acuity are great tools if you're a service-based provider that just wants to get started with offering classes or sessions, or like a counselor even could use this. Any service-based provider, it's a great way to just start billing out of the gate and fill your calendar up, okay, at the same time. So the third way you can bill people without a website is through your customer relationship management software. So, and a lot of these software, you're actually even able to build a website. It doesn't necessarily look like a website on the back end of things, but a client can go to it, see what you offer. You can send out proposals and invoices. You can send out sales packets, etc., through any of these. So if you're a creative service-based entrepreneur, an attorney, an accountant, whatever, service-based, Honeybook and Dubsado are great tools to start with. You can do pretty much everything with them. HubSpot and Agile CRM are other CRM tools that might work. And then Salesforce, if you've got a sales person, works really well. Typically, you do pay a fee for these annually, but you can do all your billing. And actually, I used Dubsado when I decided to go with Dubsado when I started, when I chose a CRM. And I immediately was able to get money back because I didn't need to use Calendly anymore because that was fit in there. I didn't need to pay for HelloSign or any of that processing. And all of that is included in these CRMs. And so instead of paying $10, $10, $10, you might pay $30 a month, but you have it all integrated together and talking to each other. So a CRM, if you're just getting started, might be a really good choice for your business. Now, a warning about CRMs. It's so easy to go down a CRM rabbit hole, right? There are hundreds of solutions out there. My recommendation is to find someone that does what you do and they do it well and say, what CRM do you use? And think about using that one, because you could research for weeks and then still not come up with a solution. And if you're a person that has trouble making decisions, or really, you're sort of like to look at all the options out there, there's no end to the options. There really isn't. So my recommendation is, again, just reach out to somebody who is doing what you want to do and ask them how they've done it, and then kind of reverse engineer your process to replicate it. Kelsey, do you have any thoughts on the different CRMs out there?
That I have much less experience with.
Yeah.
So I trust you.
I think that, for most small businesses, for service-based businesses, Honeybook and Dubsado are great. They're low cost. They're about $300 a year, and they can do a ton of stuff. So the others start to get very, very expensive very quickly. And some of them are even client-based. So you pay per client. That's a recommendation for service-based businesses, though. Product-based businesses, that is a whole other ballpark. And that's where Salesforce comes in, right? And you do pay a lot more for things like that. But look for your industry standards and what other people in your industry are using. And then you'll at least have also people that can give you best practices for those CRMs. And we will talk about user experience. Remember earlier on, I talked about how important making it easy for your customer to buy is, and those two most important parts in the sales process. What are they? One, right before they click the buy button, right? There's a chance of losing them. And two, right after they click the buy button, to mitigate that regret, that buyer's remorse that people have. So you want to reassure them or make them feel like a hero when they're buying. Make them feel like a hero when they're buying and reassure them once they've bought. Okay. So here are some numbers that you probably should know that are very important in considering if you're doing well or not, and if you need to improve your user experience. The average cart abandonment rate is 70%. So 70% of the time, someone will hit that red X instead of the buy button. So if your cart abandonment rate is 80%, you need to probably look at your user experience and the flow of that user going through, because there's something making them not want to buy, right? If it's 60%, you might think, oh, 60% of people are leaving my cart. Well, the average rate is 70%. You're doing great, right? How do you improve it even more? So, so just consider that. That's a really important number to know. So when you're considering user experience, make it easy for people to buy, okay? Multiple options to buy with. Add social proof. And what do I mean by that? Think about the last time you purchased something on Amazon. I can't remember a time where I didn't scroll down to the bottom of that page and check out what the reviews were, right? So social proof is incredibly important. And if you've ever listened in on our blog session or our session on email marketing, we talk a lot about social proof and how to leverage it. Social proof is very effective in reassuring people that they're making a good decision because other people made that good decision and they're happy with it, right? So include testimonials, include like reviews, include things like 100 people have bought this product already and there's only 4 left, right? Those are all social proof, okay? The other thing that you might want to consider is addressing objections, right? So if at the point of sale, customers often say, well, geez, the shipping is too high. Think about that. And how do you address that, right? Is there some language that you can put in there to encourage the purchase despite the cost of shipping? Is there some reassurance you can provide around how shipping will affect them, or how carefully you pack up their packages and put them, tie a bow on it and put them in the box, but hug it first, right? Like there's so many cute little things you can do in order to encourage the sale, especially as a small business. There's some really cool stuff out there, and I encourage you to reach out to your advisor if you want some ideas. And then make the customer feel great. You're making a great choice, man. Good job buying this widget. Like, it's going to make your life easier. You're going to make people happy with this product, and you just saved a puppy, right? Like, I don't know. Make people feel good about what they did. Obviously, don't lie. I mean, unless they really are saving a puppy, you shouldn't assure them that they're saving a puppy, but I mean, puppies are cute. They might work. Okay. So the other thing is, again, testimonials and reviews. Your social proof are important. Okay. So as a freebie, always like to include one. Here's a checklist that you can go through to make sure that you have addressed user experience on your website, okay? User experience is incredibly important. There's 1,000 things I could say about user experience. I could talk for days about it. It's fun, it's interesting, it's exciting, it's totally nerdy. Use the checklist. And if you have any questions, again, your advisors are available for you. All right, and if you are needing a web designer, here's a link to an ebook. Kelsey will send out the slides, but a book on how that you can actually get value from working with your web designer, because whenever you make a purchase for your business, for an asset for your business, it should earn you money, okay? So if you're spending, oh, sorry, that's my dog. Did anyone want a free puppy? No, close the sale. So if you're making a purchase of a website, it should be a revenue producing purchase for you. It should increase the bottom line on your business as far as making your business more valuable. It should not be a liability.
And we love the human element of these webinars. So
Yeah, I know. She's a 9-pound golden doodle and she's really adorable, but sorry about this.
that's right.
All
The
right.
fact that we haven't heard my bulldozers, like I said earlier, this is, I'm glad that you're the one that has background noise and not me.
All right. What questions do you have?
Well, go ahead and stick them in the chat. We've got people eyeing over your puppy, so we're all in good company. Thank you, Corey. You always do such a great job of like really going into depth, but also making it feel accessible. So thank you.
Of course.
And yes, I will be sending out that follow-up email later, and it'll include the slides. And so, like she said, all of that will be clickable and easy to access. So it looks like there is some stuff coming in. So one says, just set up a website on Wix, but Google says it's untitled. Do you know how to resolve that? There's another one.
My dog is still barking.
That is totally fine.
So by untitled, typically what they mean by that is when you're creating your website, there's an opportunity to let them know what the website is on the back end. And so I would recommend that you go into the search engine optimization tools and fill in all the slots. On the left on Wix, there'll be a place that you can click into SEO or search engine optimization, and it will give you the opportunity to do the title, the page title, the descriptions for the page, or meta descriptions they're called, as well as the URL slug, or that like you would see like WanderWeb/blog. That's the slug. So literally you don't need to know anything beyond go in and fill those boxes in the SEO.
Great, they said thank you. In terms of Apple versus PC, are there differences in the performance of any of this or glitches to keep in mind? I'm guessing that that's more of like a user from external user. I'm not sure that there's a difference when building it.
Okay, so sometimes there are some glitches with the Safari web platform, and so if that does happen, so you might think everything looks good because you're a Microsoft person, and then you'll get an email from one of your Apple friends saying, oh, the website isn't opening correctly on Safari. Typically what I would do is I would ask them to then try, like, can you try it on Google Chrome? First of all, thank you so much for letting me know. Can you log into Google Chrome and see if it works on Google Chrome? And if it does, it probably is a Safari issue, which is common as you go between the two. And in that case, I would just recommend you get a developer involved, or even just go on to something like Fiverr, Fiverr, or Upwork to find a specialist. That could be a low-cost resource for you. I don't think you need to go to an agency for that level of service. I think that you should be able to get very economical support, technical support through one of those portals.
Yeah, and Fiverr and Upwork are great resources for small businesses. If you're looking to just hire kind of one-off, or you're looking for a logo or something along those lines, but aren't ready to onboard a graphic designer. Similarly, oh yes, we get to see the beautiful singer. What a cutie.
What a hassle. Kenzie is our customer service pupper though, so she does get to participate at WanderWeb. As far as we have neighbors and she's just losing her mind. I'm so sorry, you guys. Okay, so as far as using Upwork or Fiverr, I have had better luck with Upwork, and also if you really just need something very simply, there's a lot of tools that are available to you as an entrepreneur, like Canva, which we've got a couple Canva tutorials that maybe Kelsey will link that go over how to do some stuff in Canva. And I think one of the tutorials we did, we literally designed a fictional logo for a coffee shop, and we were able to create a custom logo in 15 minutes that looked pretty cool. I mean, it wasn't perfect. A graphic designer would probably bang their head on a desk if they saw it, but it's good enough to get started.
Yeah, and I've been linking to that session quite a bit in other conversations and webinars. So it's been great how much usage we're getting out of that. So Corey has done a series of marketing webinars for us over the last few years, and Canva was her most recent one. And it's really pretty astonishing what you can accomplish with the free version of Canva. So she goes in a little bit depth to the paid versions, but a lot of that is all free. So take advantage of our recordings on our YouTube channel. So I'll make sure I link that.
We literally designed a logo for a business, and I'm like, what about a coffee shop? Let's do it. And we literally went in, and in 15 minutes, and it wasn't a plan to set, you know, it wasn't really a planned logo design. It was, let's figure out what would be meaningful for us as a group. And we designed it together, and it looked good.
It was great. You didn't take my suggestions, however, for the name, which was it's fine, whatever. But we're getting lots of thank yous. I agree. Thank you, Corey. You're always such a great help when it comes to marketing things. Lots of thank yous in the chat. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We hope that you found it as helpful. Like I said, I'll send out that follow-up email later on, and it'll have the recording and the slides. So if there's anything you need to rewind to, you can, and all of the clickable links will be there, as well as all of our contact information. So you can get set up with a business advisor. And if you'd like, you can also ask for a specialist so we can get you connected. Otherwise, I hope that everyone has a really great afternoon.